Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is 11/22/23. That's November 22nd, 23. Wow, what a big date in the history of the world. I want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. And I want to thank Doug Harvey for introducing me to Daniel M. Hawkins for part two. Where in the heck you calling in from, Daniel?
I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California, the Eagle Rock suburb, so just northeast of downtown.
It's a real honor and a pleasure to be with you again. Part one was really exciting and enlightening for me. So continuing on, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So like knife and fork extends our teeth, the shutter in a camera might be an extension of our eyelid, and even non-tangible, say religion or consciousness might be an extent, or religion or philosophy might be an extension of consciousness. So what could we say as an intervention artist and a sculptor is your main tool? What would you say is your main tool? A screwdriver, a pen? You have a lot of maybe different tools you use, but what would you say as an artist, what's your main tool? And then as a musician, what's your main instrument?
Well, just for ease, when people ask me that I don't know, oh, what type of artist are you? I'll often just default to sculptor because I feel like that's the most simple. But I would much prefer to see myself as an intervention artist where it's my actions, my presence really is the tool and the materials kind of meet the concept.
Right. So then that's what is, because it is you're inventing the action.
Yep.
So what is the action an extension of? What humanness are you extending with your action?
That's a good question. Like what characteristic of personality or
Well, it's, again, you put it in the context you want, but if it's
yeah.
like, okay, I'll tell you, the McLuhan says a funny one. I interviewed a filmmaker yesterday. I said, so what does film extend? And he went, oh, the mouth. And it extends memory and it extends vision. So most people say film extends vision and memory, or they could.
Yeah.
I thought him saying it extends the mouth was amazing because McLuhan says it extends the foot because you travel.
Yeah.
So you're kind of thinking in, it doesn't have to be tangible extension, like the eyelid
Yeah.
extent is an extent, but yeah, I mean, just off the top of your head, what would the action extend?
Well, I think it would extend humor. I mean, I think a little bit about pranksterism and
Yeah.
its relationship to art. And there is kind of a blurry line. There's a whole discourse of artists turned pranksters, pranksters turned artists. And so I was having this moment the other day where I have a cat and I realized I don't think he experiences humor. I think it's something that it might extend to primates, but it's also something that's quite specific to humans. And so maybe humor, maybe pranksterism is the mechanism. And then, I feel like my creativity comes through my arms, out my fingers.
Yeah. That's really good because there's a lot we can go into in the humor thing. Let's go into that in a second, but just staying on the music thing.
Yep.
What's your main instrument when you're doing your improv music?
Vocalization.
Oh my God. But then you would use a microphone.
Yep.
Okay. So what does the mic extend?
The perversities of my mind. The way I have this image, and I don't know if this is something I've actually seen, but I feel like I've seen this time and time again of crazy people roaming Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard with megaphones. And when
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
performing, I often think of like my microphone as the megaphone of a schizophrenic mind. And
That is it. Definitely. That's great. Because we talked about Wild Man Fisher last time.
yep.
Did you look him up at all?
A little bit, yeah. It's been a little while, so I need a little refresher, but yeah.
But let's stay on humor then for a second, Daniel. This is fun. What is the function of laughter?
I don't know that there is a function. I mean, well, actually, that's not true. I laughter and humor are obviously as instinctual as anger or envy or sadness, and so laughter might be like the brain's alleviation mechanism to
Yeah,
some of the darkness that we experience just throughout our lives.
it's good because Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
Oh, I like that.
So it's sort of that letting. And then McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen. He said, "Behind every joke, there's a grievance." So we can eliminate the word every. Behind jokes, there's a grievance. What do you think of that?
I like it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. It could be a grievance of our own, emotional experience or interpersonal grievances or institutional grievances. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
and then satire. My friend who worked with Robin Williams said, when I asked him, "Can satire be destructive?" He said, "Well, that's the job of satire.
Yeah.
But if me or you draw a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive." So Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. In fact, Zappa said, "Watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else."
Well, that did.
So what do you think the function of satire is?
I think it's a counterweight to power, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I see everything that you just said, but I think it's one of the few like societal counterweights to power.
yeah,
Because otherwise, if you fight power with the same forces, then you just embody them, while satire dismantles them.
yeah. That's good. But then we got this slew of fake news, which, in my days, we had that was the week that was, and then Harry Shearer and, Saturday Night Live doing satire news.
Yep.
And they had to change fake news in Wikipedia and call it satire news because it got mixed up with disinformation.
Yep.
But the satire news, so Colbert or Jon Stewart, or there's so many of them now. Does it more activate or more pacify the viewer?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. Uh, I don't know. I think we're in like a really strange moment with satire. I don't know that I don't want to say that we might be in like a post-satire reality right now, but when realities become so perverse, it's like almost unable to be satired. And comedians are complaining about this is how do you write political satire in this landscape? It's so absurd. Anything that could be pushing the furthest limits is completely preemptively neutralized. And so I would want to believe satire is activating. I think we're just in a very, very extreme moment where I really don't know satire's ability to function right now. It's
Yeah,
it, it's quite it's quite disturbing.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I had trouble like when Alex Baldwin would do Trump every week on Saturday Night Live. It was like, what? Do you work for Trump? I
Yeah.
mean, and all these people who satirize Trump. I mean, and then Martin Luther said that's how he dealt with the devil, is he mocked him.
Yes.
So you want to think mocking is doing its job, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's doing the opposite. But I don't know. It's, but I
Well,
like your go ahead. Yeah.
I'm developing a film. It'll be a couple years before I really make it, but I see it as a satire. It's about this absurdist quest to find the last undiscovered mountain. And I really like, as I'm developing it and writing it, I'm seeing it as a massive indictment of the cult of personality that surrounds people like Trump, some of these Silicon Valley kind of guru types. And like, I think the way in which I'm having to approach it is much more subtle than I would have done had I made this film 10 years ago. And I
Yeah.
think it's like the film's going to be much more poetic. The satire is almost going to be couched versus just right in your face. Like Saturday Night Live is right in your face. They have, like you said, Alec Baldwin doing Trump. No one necessarily will see my film and think of Trump at all, but they might think of the belief systems and the communities that contribute to kind of people investing in a cult like figure. And
Yeah.
there's some other avenue, like a river is, changing its shape all the time. I think satire's like the main channel for satire for the last 30 years is being incredibly disrupted, and the river doesn't quite know exactly the path it's about to take.
Yeah, that was good because it reminded me it's sort of like the t-shirt. Ren and Stimpy are the Beavis and Buttheads of our time. So it went from like Simpsons, Beavis, Butthead, Ren and Stimpy, South Park, and it's all like, man, I missed all that. I couldn't take it and I didn't want to take it. But that's how probably people more your generation, that's the satire you grew up on.
Yep.
And it is Manipian satire. It is really strong in your face satire.
Yep.
And yeah, to have it subtle, can you do that now? And that's that. But let's go into film then. So is this your first is it a feature screenplay you're writing?
It is. Yep. It'll be
Yeah.
a feature film and that I'm producing. And I've done some excursions into video based projects, but I really don't share that material. I don't know why. Maybe it's I'm not ready yet, but I have a number of short films that are in progress, and this is going to be a much larger, big kind of feature debut.
And this is considered a fiction film or nonfiction?
I would consider it like not documentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say fiction. I would say fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you see Mike Kelly's feature film?
I've seen portions of it. I have not seen the full.
Because I would, the really interesting thing about that was Cindy Sherman or who made Julian Schnabel, they're like artists. Now they're going to make a feature film. And they make a feature film. When Mike Kelly made his feature film, it wasn't a feature film. It was art, in my opinion. It was like, this is not, so it's hard not to fall into that formatting thing that, oh, now I'm going to expand something to a 90-minute format and it's called a feature film. So you got to sort of play that game, what it is. So McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or a bad movie. It's a good or a bad viewing experience.
I like
that. Well, what's your idea on that?
Okay. So Doug Harvey, as you mentioned in the intro, we have a semi-regular gathering where we call it Incorrect Cinema, and we watch all sorts of like B movies and kind of cultural misfit movies. And there's a perfect example there. We watched a movie. God, what was it? It was Eddie Murphy, and I'm forgetting the title, but maybe it'll come to me. But it's Brian Wilson in an interview was asked about what's his favorite movie. And he listed this really terrible, more contemporary Eddie Murphy film, Norbit. Norbit's the one, I think.
Yeah.
And so we watched it, and I'm forgetting my revelation, but I have my notes on it. But it was like, had I watched that movie in a million other circumstances, it completely would have slipped by me. But just in a slightly different context with a group of friends, it kind of opened a door. And it's weird. I was talking to my girlfriend where I was like, that's why we watch these terrible movies, is
Yeah.
because they still have beautiful things to offer. And
Yeah.
if it comes to me, my revelation, I'll describe it. But yeah.
Well, it's funny, Daniel, you mentioned in part one how one of your favorite forms of information was narrative film.
Yep.
And I was like, well, that's amazing because, you think, oh, I'm an artist. I watch, experimental or installation videos or, in the knowledge of experimental film. I mean, a knowledge of normal films is something most Americans grow up with. You
Yep.
grow up knowing how to talk about film or talk about TV or talk about sports. You have something to say about them. And one time, uh, this lady lectured at this film festival and said, well, political films uh, that change us, that have an effect on us, are like Titanic. And so they're huge films. They're not intended to change, like a a great political film is Harlan County. It taught us how to make a a documentary that really exposes something in America that people need to know
Yep.
about mining, and it probably did enlighten people.
Oh,
But it wasn't that agenda ridden sledgehammer like say Michael Moore. He's got an agenda,
yep.
and he does turn the news into a popcorn theater movie experience. But then Avatar came out years ago, and it was the biggest cinema event in the history of the medium.
Yep.
And it was pro Mother Nature and anti the man. And you ask anybody coming out, they go, "What'd you think?" They'd go, "Great special effects."
I know it's
but then someone said, "Nope, I had a revelation." So you can't really tell what cinema does. Like Sidney Lumet says, cinema can't do diddly squat, but it ain't going to keep me from trying.
yeah.
I said to Richard, who runs Beyond Baroque Poetry Center, "Can films do anything?" He says, "Yeah. If James Dean wraps his cigarettes in his t-shirt, like up here, then kids will do that."
Yep.
So it's funny what this, what you being an artist, especially interventionist artist, when you think of that, and then you say, "Wow, I love narrative film."
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that was so you sort of suss that out with the Eddie Murphy,
Well, and I remember the revelation, and it's not totally relevant to this, but just thinking about Brian Wilson and how vulnerable he had been during periods of his life, and how impressionable he was, where his relationship with that psychiatrist Landy, and he would just kind of be told what he liked and what he was doing. And I think that in that interview, it was like, I think he didn't know that was just the last movie he saw, so he just decided that was his favorite movie. And I just thought the absurdity of it was kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
But more on topic, some of my attraction to engaging with kind of mass media like movies, and also maybe my interest as an artist participating in those, is I really like the concept of like a sleeper cell, which is conventional kind of Hollywood cinema movies, even in the independent community, there's a lot of just reinforcing conventions, but the vessel's kind of the same. If someone has interesting ideas, like you just referenced Avatar, where it's pushing, those are big ideas, and whether someone just notices the special effects, like that's still seeping into their consciousness. That's incredibly powerful. And whether that was James Cameron's full intention or not, someone can kind of operate in those arenas, and music's also a good area in which, someone could do some serious, what one might call damage, but one might call, influence with being kind of a sleeper cell within the mass media arena.
Yeah. What does sleeper cell mean? Suss that out a little deep.
Well, sleeper cell. So how it was most often used, as I understand it, was during the Cold War. You would have people coming from Russia, and then we would be sending people, and they would send like some teenagers, and the teenagers would live in like Virginia,
Yeah.
and then they would have normal jobs, and they would have kids, and they would just have a full life that was like quote unquote a productive life. But all the while, as they're integrating into the community and then their kids are having grandkids, they're still part of the FSB, and they're still channeling information, and they're still basically doing like ultra deep level surveillance. And so to kind of participate in a cultural warfare. And so a sleeper cell is like a kind of espionage cell that's so deep that even if they were interrogated, even if they were surveilled, it would be nearly impossible for someone to really be able to like determine. So they're deep in there. And you know, I think the most kind of cliched idea around sleeper cell is like the Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's amazing.
Yeah, deep on the inside.
Yeah, but you know, Manchurian Candidate reminds me of there's a black man who worked for the CIA, COINTELPRO, and he shot photographs of the Black Panthers.
Oh, wow.
Now, to me,
Yeah.
he said, I'm going to work for the man and be undercover, but I'm going to promote my people's rebellion with my art form. So he got paid by the man to help. So how does we really know deep down, was he knowing I'm doing this double thing, you know? And it's what you talked about is MK Ultra too, you know, like all that, you know, that deeper sleeper cell was well explained. Now that's what you talked about. A couple words I loved you said in part one was leverage.
Yeah.
And you talked about the inner and the outer, or the interior and the exterior.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm curious if we can go into that a little, because my friend invented, who studied, or she turned McLuhan on to feminism, Mary Jane Schultz, and she invented a word called splitteracy. So it's literacy starting with splitting the right and the left hemisphere. That's what reading does to us. And it's spelled with a money sign S, splitteracy. So, you know, when we invented printed word, we fucked ourselves up because we took the inner, well, when we invented spoken word, we took the inner and the outer and we separated it.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's, you know, in talking about this, I'm curious, is that what we're doing by watching a movie? We're entering where we're, you know, sort of that corpus callosum, right and left hemisphere. We're integrating both the right and the left. And like Harry Smith says, the purpose of cinema is to put you to sleep. And then you're dreaming awake. And then Yoko says, you know, yeah, if you dream a dream with other people, it becomes reality. So we're like a collective dreaming in combining the inner and the outer. So I don't know, how does that apply to what your sort of aspirations in film are? Is it that kind of merging or separating the right and the left hemisphere, and what you call, I think you called it interior and exterior?
Yeah. Well, just as an initial start point, Jeffrey Valance, you might be familiar with this.
I've interviewed him with all these questions. Yes.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And he has a new book out, and it's about his spiritual writings. And there was an event in Echo Park. And my question was that I was so curious about, because like I love films, but I also love storytelling. which
Yeah.
has strong like oral storytelling, and that has a strong history within art and even contemporary art, but also it seems to be a pretty primal way of kind of existing in human consciousness. And I asked him, and I didn't get a clear answer, but I asked him, you know, like putting your stories, which he'll have a million. If you have any conversation with him, he'll have a million stories. He just endless sea of
Yeah.
stories, and they're all super entertaining. And I asked him, by putting them in this book, in this written vessel, he's externalizing them in a way is that changing his relationship to these stories
Yeah.
now that they're actually have been externalized. Before, he would carry them with him, and it would be this kind of play.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a clear answer, but it was definitely something that I'm really curious for myself as I'm starting to develop, like with these movies, more narrative based
Yeah.
projects. What happens when you externalize it and then lock it into an external format? And I think, like, I really love that back and forth. I love storytelling because it's kind of it externalizes, then it comes back in. And so I know I'm not totally answering your question, but that was just the thought that came to mind, that it seemed like maybe it's because I don't totally have an answer yet, but that's a question that's kind of starting to swirl for me, which is, what the heck is happening here,
Yeah.
and what do I think about it?
No, it was good, Daniel, because it's basically performance art. You're not supposed to film it, document it, or anything. But now it's, you do that and you can make your living, but it's got that risk factor, which we talked about, in that unpredictability. And same with your music pursuits as a noise musician or improver. You're not like going up there. I like when you go to a reggae show and they go, "How many people like reggae music?" And they go, "We do." You go, "How many people like improvisational experimental music?" People go, "What?"
Yeah,
Yay! It's not like this. You're setting it. Well, that's when we invented words and printed word and spoken word, is we wrecked our memory and our imagination, because you had to remember it and then your imagination redid it. So Jeffrey's stories would change each time a little. And once you put in the book, is that, you're laying it down. So that's why Finnegan's Wake is the ultimate, because it's totally sounds like you're making everything up on the spot constantly, no matter how many times you read it. But did you ask Jeffrey Valance that question in front of an audience or one-on-one?
in front of an audience, and
Right.
and he was starting a story, and I forget the story, but yeah, it did I think he didn't quite, he went on a different kind of
Yeah.
path and didn't circle back. But I am gonna follow up with him because I'm so curious.
Yeah. No, we should really have a salon, like with me, you, Doug, Jeffrey, and then maybe a couple others, because that's really fun. I love to break off into those. But I have to tell you that this is perfect, because we touched on Mike Kelly a few things. And one was when I interviewed him twice, one in his bed, in his living room, just me and him, and then one in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And in the one in front of the audience, I said, "Hey, I heard that you said, making art is making my problems everyone else's problems." And he says, "Oh yeah." And then, can I ask you about that? And he said, "Yes." When I asked him, he goes, "I never said that." In front of the audience, he denied it. I thought that was so perfect.
Yep.
I didn't like say, "Well, you just told me you said that back there." And there I found the source. It's like some catalog where I got it eventually, but it just came to me. So that's the thing. It's forever changing in flux, this inner and the outer. And once you nail it in a time-based medium, you're fucked. You're like, okay. And it's not that you're fucked. It's just that it changes it.
Yeah.
And, that's that the fact that you said oral storytelling. So Peter Greenaway said that cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers? Are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? So Tony Conrad made a film, The Flicker. It's just black and white flickering on and off for 15 minutes. It's not storytelling per se, but me or you could watch it and have a story go through our head.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure you're familiar with some experimental filmmakers just being an artist,
Yep.
knowing what is happening there. Are they telling stories a different way? Or it's same with your experimental music. Are you telling musical stories a different way or doing something different than that?
I think it's all obviously locked in. It's a time-based experience that, like, I think when whether we're watching a performance or like an art performance or like a kind of a musical noise performance or a conventional film or an experimental film, we're still having, like you said, our thoughts. There's all this stuff happening, and
Yeah.
that's just as much a part of it as whether it's imagery happening in front of us or flickering. Doug has these found moldy slides I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is such a film that's you're being taken on a journey, and yet it's totally abstract. I mean,
Yeah.
largely. I mean, there's some are more representational than others. And so I think it's still a story. I think I
Yeah.
like the idea of kind of breaking free, and really kind of reinventing, like breaking apart the kind of the palace that cinema and movies are built on. But I think it's locked into something that is undeniable. And I maybe that's just the time-based experience where
Yeah.
bringing our memories, our daydreaming, because whether it's you're watching Jason Bourne or Avatar, that's sending you on. You still have daydreams. I think the danger of more conventional cinema, and I studied a little bit of cinema, is like the totalizing experience where you mentioned like movies making people kind of like taking people into a daydreaming state.
Yeah.
And is that like, and then now I'm extending that, is that distraction or is that activating
Yeah.
some essential human experience? And I think there are filmmakers and film studios that really kind of lean towards the distraction and but again, it's all the same scaffolding, and I think it's just how you're wielding it.
Yeah, Daniel, Andrew Noren said it best. He's obsolete. He says, if you put one frame after another, that is linear storytelling. Sorry, that's linearizing the experience. If it's gobbledygook abstract or if it's a close up on a face, it's still one frame after another. But who flipped that? Dolly said, watch films with your eyes shut, which I used to say, if you want to figure out how important Carl Stalling as a musical composer was in America, watch a Bugs Bunny cartoon with your eyes shut. You cannot really hear the music in Bugs Bunny. It's so much integrated into this other thing. No, why would I ever watch it with my eyes shut? To realize what Carl Stalling was doing to your head with the music.
Yep.
It's like it's not there. And then Warhol, who's probably the grandest of all the experimental filmmakers, to just say, okay, I'm gonna make an 8-hour film of the Empire State Building. That to me is like, okay, we're fucking with the form. Nobody fucks with the form. They all go, okay, so this is Michael Apted. I asked him 40 years ago, I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922. But in the 80s, it flourished with MTV to the point where Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. Well, Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we actually learn to take in information faster? Or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we're brainwashed to believe we can. I think when you think about smartphones and the internet, like I've experienced over the last 15 years, yeah, there's more information flooding through my eyes, but what I'm absorbing at the absolute same rate. And maybe my engagement time during the day is increased, but there was interesting clip. I don't even know where on YouTube I saw it, but it was somewhere, and I don't know who was saying this, but they were saying if you have a smartphone, you're actively a cyborg.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the reason I mention that is because one, I kind of believe it's true, and two, like I think our side of things is exactly the same. It's just we have an apparatus that is it's that it can keep pumping, but our brain can only take as much as it can take.
Yeah. Can humans literally multitask?
Well, allegedly not. I don't believe so. I've tried.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, I can't. I mean, well, so here's the thing though about multitasking is that and creativity is that I don't paint as much as I used to. I used to actually have a pretty active painting practice, and it was always very important for me to have either some kind of video, whether it's a movie, television, or just kind of abstract art cinema playing in the background. I wanted visuals around me and sound around me, whether that was music or something really experimental. And I felt that it was very important that I kind of short circuit my brain to then be able to kind of let go into the moment and kind of step away from like conscious control and get into a more automatic zone, rely a little bit more on my like instinctive intelligence versus my kind of intentional intelligence. And that is, I think, where multitasking, like it's still a single task, but it's a multiple I don't know, there's multiple things happening in which it opens a door to something maybe more pure or
Sure.
primal. Yeah.
I like pure there. I was waiting for your word because I think I told you last time when I worked for George Carlin, we got this flyer in the mail. It says, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. And
Oh.
it's a joke, but it's also, you almost flipped it. I'm trying to get less control over my spontaneity. You're trying to just let the spontaneity be, and whatever happens happens, and not put up any parameters. But when you said the active cyborg for the cell phone, well, that's McLuhan's line is unbelievable. He says technology is the most human thing. That inventing things is so. Yeah, so what if a cell phone's a cyborg? I mean, I saw this woman walking down the street today and she's just like this typing. I says, this is amazing. She's walking down the street with a typewriter.
Yep.
It's like, have we progressed? It's like walking down the street with a pad of paper and pencil drawing. Is there something bad? No, it's just that it's so pervasive. I used to, a little period in my life, I would ride my bike in the morning and I'd see people and go, fuck your cell phone, look at the clouds. And people would like go, get away from me, Yep. But you can't do that. But it is like, well, I was going to tell you, I saw the Nam June Paik film at probably the greatest movie theater in the world last week, at the Geodesic Dome at the Academy. Movie. I mean, it's the most state-of-the-art movie theater. Have you been there yet?
No.
And I mean, it's amazing. Showing Nam June Paik free there. I was like, wow, I'll go. And so a woman's next to me, younger, whips out her cell phone as soon as the movie starts. And in my space, I go like this. She turns to me and goes, shut the fuck up. Now, I knew immediately, just move over 3 or 4 seats. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with her, Jerry.
Yep.
So, because I went through this for 20 years showing, 30 years showing films. People have mutated. They cannot see a film for 2 hours without having access. But she's shooting stuff off the screen. So she's learning from the most subversive video artist. And she's so who am I to tell her to, but she broke 2 protocols. Don't use your cell phone and don't talk during films.
Yep.
But we have to let go or learn how to cope, whatever. My friend said the announcement before the film should be, and there was no announcement, it should be, if you have to use your cell phone for the next 2 hours, then leave the auditorium right now.
Yep.
I mean, and they would go say, she would say, fuck you. They still, I've seen people use their cell phones at film festivals in their pocket. It doesn't matter. We want to make a value judgment. Sorry, that's a human tool to communicate.
Yep.
So where did you get your framing aesthetic, Daniel? Because it's sort of like the gaze. Where did the gaze come from? Because now John Berger's way of seeing the human gaze, the female gaze, the biological, these different things. But there's a way, being a filmmaker, you're even going to get this. Okay, I want to frame it like this, with the center. What informed your framing aesthetic?
Well, I did spend a lot of time at the start of my days at UCLA in photography, and I think that probably was just the most kind of real world time in which I spent with a frame, having to frame stuff. And I didn't do particularly experimental photography. I shifted to experimental photography later, but I spent at least 2 years really spending a lot of time like trying to think about how I wanted to restructure my reality through essentially the two-dimensional frame. As far as other influences, I don't know. I mean, obviously, movies, entertainment, they seep in. They shape. Like probably like this is maybe more to do with storytelling and imagination. I moved around most of my life, so I lived in Europe. I lived in Northern California. I lived in Texas and then Southern California, and I really kind of had to rely on my imagination as kind of my grounding location. I was always moving, so I couldn't necessarily just say, "Oh, well, I'm home. I can relax." My kind of safe space was an imagined kind of daydreaming zone. And so I think like as I'm writing and developing this film, and this actually happens with most of my art, is that there's often like a spontaneous moment, but as I'm writing this movie, I'll sit back and I'll put on, some kind of German industrial music or ambient music, and I'll just sit back and I'll start to watch the movie in my head, and it'll just start to play out. And oddly, there is visuals that I'm seeing that are basically pre-framed, and then from there, like when I actually get a camera out and get set it to be captured, then there's like subtle decisions, but primarily it is just something that plays out in my brain.
Yeah, I like that word pre-framed, because that's like, so you learn your frame, that's what people tend not to know. They go, where'd you get your framing aesthetic? It's from all the people who painted and photographed before we did.
Yep.
And so then when Robert Frank came along and he went like this, or Cassavetes, in a fight scene, it's like the camera's on the floor. It's like, wait a minute, that's the, then you go, oh, now I'm going to emulate the broken frame, the non-symmetry people.
Yep.
So what was, pre-framed? Well, we'll get to, okay, let's just do that right now. So T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh God. Uh, I want to say humor,
Yeah.
but there's some kind of competition between humor and just like strange visuals. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think.
Strange visuals. That's good because some people say visuals. This experimental filmmaker, I love her answer. She goes, what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew.
That's
Because that's like if you're saying pre-framed
Yep.
in so your inner dialogue, you mean it's pre-framed by the stuff that you've already digested.
Yep.
Yeah.
You
But
know, there going
yeah,
back to my UCLA days, there was for better or for worse, and I felt for better. Uh, if you enter like as a freshman, I was an undergraduate, so I wasn't part of their graduate program, but I was an undergraduate, and your entire first year of your time there, you're in a modernism course, an art history course, and basically what they wanted to do was we want a base level literacy among our students for like pre-modernism to contemporary art. And if we just know that they've seen a selection of those works, there's going to be a baseline kind of literacy
yeah.
among the history of art. And oh my god, that completely changed who I am as an artist. Oh my god. And that cannot be undone. And whether how much it influences me actively day to day now is a bigger question mark, but that just blew my mind and it pre-framed everything I made from there on out. And I was grateful for it. And I also it changed the conversations we would have as fellow artists and students because you knew they knew the history as well. And so people couldn't really bullshit their way through this or that. It's like, hey, we're dealing with a common knowledge. Let's take that and then go to the next stop.
It's really heavy what you said because when Wyndham Lewis says the artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future, I like to talk to younger people and say, "Oh, you got to hear this or see this," and then I go, "Everything I told you, don't do that." But yet again, you didn't. I was wondering if you were going to say I kind of regretted that because that put my reality tunnel vision into knowing that, and then how do you? That's actually a question I had in my notes is how do we stand on the shoulders of giants and see farther? And it's Harold Bloom saying you absorb your influence, then you abandon them. So how did you find that baseline literacy influential and you didn't regret it, but how do you abandon it now? Do you?
I mean, I think I have. I think I wish I had a little bit more of a like active relationship to it because how often have I brought up art like artworks or art as an influence to me? Not much. And so except for until this moment. And so I think it was so transformative and I really was making a lot of work in direct response to what I was seeing. And then as time went on, I got further and further out into the world and it was other influences. I basically opened the door to other experiences, and
Yeah.
that changed it all.
You learn to have life influence you and not all the people that you studied influence you.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, how'd you learn to do that? Did they also have a class on how to abandon what we just taught you?
They should. That should be the final class. Uh, I think in part it was disillusionment with like I left UCLA at the very start of the Great Recession when the art world was changing quite a bit and there's a lot of opportunities contracting and people are like I was supposed to have a job at Mike Kelly's studio and he had to lay a bunch of people off and they weren't even taking. I offered to work for free, and they're just like, we don't even have people to manage the free people right now. It's like, there's just no.
Oh, wow. So
There's
you
no
almost got in.
Yep. And
Wow.
so like when that happened, I think it was like by circumstance, then I was like, well, fuck it. I gotta go rogue here. And then it was uh just, I mean, pretty quickly I was just having these profound experiences out in the world that I thought, like, I don't know how this has anything to do with the art world and art history, but I'm having things that I'm responding to that I need to reconcile, and this seems more important.
Yeah. That's James Benning, teaches experimental film at Cal Arts.
Yep.
Great filmmaker. Uh, Steve Polta told me 2 of the assignments he gives his students, they're making films. He goes, go to a police station and sit in the waiting room.
Oh,
And the other one is go to this hill and see the sunset. Watch the sunset at this hill. Now, I specifically wanted to ask you about this. I heard on Coast to Coast Radio last night. This woman said, "Go buy an orange alarm clock. It's actually to help people who can't get up at the right time, and they can't fall asleep at the right time, to have a standard sleep pattern. And it's an alarm clock that emulates an orange color in your room. Do you know about these?
I know about these. Yep. Yeah.
And so it reminded me of one of my favorite filmmakers. He said, what'd you learn from your mom? He said, don't be afraid of color." We don't think of color
Yep.
being this element. And what is color? So yeah.
Well, it's so funny, as a sculptor, I've been color phobic for a long time, and I'm changing. My relationship to color is changing a lot. The moment I stopped painting, and I was doing a lot of pretty desaturated uh, uh, paintings, because color is so complicated, and unless you're willing to kind of unleash your soul to it, it's usually going to have a pretty nasty results. But once you start to, and it was really spending time out in the desert working on my lighthouse, which is, you wouldn't expect color necessarily to play a huge role out there, but the subtleties of color that I experienced out there were so profound that it just, that's a door I can't close now, and I'm grateful for that, because color's a whole other beast, and it's incredible.
Yeah, it's back to photography. I always was, why do all the great photographers move to Arizona and New Mexico?
Yep.
Like, why can't they just go there and shoot the photos and then leave? No, you have to live there.
Yep.
That was a great statement. Because I dumpster dive kids' art, because parents just throw it out, and you get a pile this thick and you can find one keeper. And my favorites are where they smush every color together and it turns brown.
Well, I'm grateful. One of the things being around and knowing Doug Harvey is he's been a huge proponent of arts among disability populations.
Yeah.
And so I get to be exposed to a lot of this art. He's curated and has his own collection. And sometimes I'm just sitting there and I'm like, man, like, I'm seeing things happening that I really don't see elsewhere. And one of the other places that I see it is with kids, where it's just, this is going to contradict my whole statement about UCLA and that baseline knowledge, because there's no rules, there's no boundaries. It's all experience, and it's all being in the moment. And that can really open up some incredible things. I wish I could be more just open to reality. And it just.
Well, consider making a pixel vision film someday, because we always go, the artists are always trying to get to their childlike innocence. That's
Yep.
a known, you just said it right there.
Yep.
But well, why don't you cheat and just start with the kid's toy?
Yeah.
And with the greatest statement, because Pixel, my festival just celebrated its 33rd year. And what people tell me as they're leaving, walking out, it's like, what am I watching this for? They get lured in because the LA Weekly says this is cool. And then they get there and go, this sucks. And one guy walked out and he said, oh, I get it. You're using a toy camera, and if you try to be profound, it won't come off. But if you are like a kid and you approach it with that innocence, it can be profound.
Yep.
So what was the motive of the cave artist?
I mean, I assume just to process their reality.
Yeah.
I think that inside outside thing comes back to cave art, where I think humans have to externalize their experience and then reabsorb it.
Yeah.
And it's some kind of fundamental part of understanding and memory. And so I think it's well known, I hope I'm correct on this, that cave art also had a relationship to storytelling in front of fires. And Werner Herzog called it or referred to certain cave art as proto-cinema.
Yeah.
And the way it was drawn and how it interacted with active fires. And it has to be processing memories and experiences, in my opinion.
It's really good. What's more important? No, actually, I was going to ask you this because you went right along with it. Is perception reality?
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to believe that there was more of an objective reality. I think that's disproving itself.
Yeah.
Every day that goes by.
Daniel, if you've never seen this is Bruce Conner's favorite film. It's called Uso Justo. USOJUSTO. It's online free. Coleman Miller. It's a fake experimental film. And if you went over to Bruce Conner's house, he'd make you watch it.
Yeah.
It's really worth watching.
I know.
Anyways, yeah, it's important film. And when I interviewed Coleman Miller, the maker, I says, is perception reality? He says, that's all you got.
Heck yeah.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction.
In your accomplishments, how would you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck probably is first. Ambition is second, and skill is last. I don't think skill's particularly necessary. Sometimes it's better if you don't have it.
Great. So I used to ask that question, is ambition based more on fear or joy? 80% of people would say fear. So then I read William Friedkin, the director of Exorcist, and he says, in Hollywood, luck and skill have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Yeah. I could believe that.
Two of my film heroes, George Manupelli, started the Ann Arbor Film Festival over 60 years. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression, and Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, environments, and cultures are dominant?
Oh, vehicle. I think for sure. I like to think about us as like conduits.
Yeah.
There's some higher consciousness and we're just kind of terrestrial conduits.
Can art making be egoless?
I don't think so. Well, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's hard. I'm just going to stick with I don't think so. I think it's so hard to break from yourself. I think it's almost impossible. Like our own minds get in our way as much as I'd love to abandon it.
McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. Artists dream awake. Everybody has this ability to create these scenarios in the middle of the night. But in not to sound a lot elitist, artists actually can do that while they're awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
I think daydreaming. I mean, I'd equivalent, create equivalency that is a really similar process to actual nighttime dreaming. I think where you basically start to sink out of your present reality and your mind is traveling.
Is it similar or different to lucid dreaming?
I'd say similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say very similar.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Name one.
I'm making a film. Oh, I mean everything. I think like Doug Harvey has characterized my practice as I forget how he put it, but it's kind of overextending ambition as a like generative process to see where things can go wrong, and the art
Oh,
is kind of where things start. It's where the train starts to shake off the tracks, and I like to believe that that's been my intention, but it might just be kind of unavoidably part of who I am and what my mind is.
that's that you're anticipating a question about two down the road. So that was important. Really good, Daniel. This is Sun Ra. He said, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
I like that.
Tell me one major element of your art making that stayed the same and one major element that's changed. Or just not art making, but more your creativeness or however you want to put it.
Yeah, I think the thing that's changed is kind of if we're talking about the inside outside and art being the byproduct of externalizing some kind of interior um experience
Yeah.
or whatnot. I think the audience, I find myself kind of really questioning what is the function of the art world right now.
Yeah.
um, I think it's I've had I'm pretty young. I have a pretty limited vantage point, but I've seen it change enough that I've really wondered what is the point of this
Yeah.
version of the art world. So that's the biggest thing that's changed. And I think like um my creative mischievousness is stayed
Yeah.
this, I would say the same. Maybe it's grown just a little bit, but and that I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we talked about that great line that Mike Kelly said is like art's the last bastion where there are no limits. You can just go. But this creative mischief making, is that rooted how your parents raised you or on your own? Where did that come from?
I think it's somehow kind of reclaiming my own, I don't know, my own life or world. I was
Yeah.
raised in a pretty conservative environment and had to kind of move around in the pursuit of my dad's career and stuff. And I think it was a way in which I realized, oh, I can start to kind of reclaim
Yeah.
my mind and my experience by being a little bit of like a trickster.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh God, I love this. Yeah. Um, well, I think it's related to the film I'm eventually going to make. Is that it's like my own kind of. I have like a pretty existential worldview that's on the kind of darker bent, and there was a period of time in which I would have wrecking anxiety and agoraphobic attacks, and as disabling as those were, I thought, oh, this is so interesting. This is so beautiful, and it's also generated lots of ideas, and I've just kind of leaned into, what would be some of my kind of, in conventional kind of speaking, some of my kind of psychological weaknesses or sensitivities, and just thought, no, this is great. This is like, the idea that like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever, those people don't have, they're shaping their personas, and I'm sure they are having freakouts and meltdowns and this and that. And wouldn't it be just much more interesting if those people were kind of the full embodiment, in the public eye? So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we like to see our heroes fail, and it's an amazing thing because it shows you're human. You know, Zappa said it best. He says, "I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure." But Cocteau said this thing. He goes, "Take the criticism of your first major piece of art or your first major thing and exploit that for the rest of your career."
I think Mike Kelly did that. I heard a story where he was, I forget what he was doing at the time. It was right before all the stuffed animal stuff,
Yeah.
and that someone kind of wrote a critique of his work, but also really projected a lot of like, oh, there's all this psychological,
Yeah.
stuff, this perversity, and
And
and as the story goes, he's like, I like that. I'm running with it.
I'm running with that. That's in his obit. I always quote this big New York Times obit, and it says one critic said his art made him feel soiled.
That is great.
Yikes. Okay, so anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When there's a lack of motivation, I guess. I find anger very motivating. It breaks through. It breaks through. There's like walls of sadness. It breaks through uh, depression. It breaks through stuckness and confusion. It's pretty galvanizing.
Yeah. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
I think women tend to have a more relational experience where, like, among kind of interpersonal relational experiences, I think men tend to be raised to think kind of externally about careers and power and ambition. And yeah, that's probably kind of regrettable.
What caused matriarchy?
Like, matriarchal societies, or
Yeah.
yeah. Probably enlightenment, I would
Wow.
think. Yeah.
It's amazing. There's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So, how do you what do you think of this line, "You create what you resist"? I'm not saying you, Daniel, but one creates what one resists. What do you think of that line?
It feels true.
Yeah.
It feels true. It feels like there's inescapable, we cannot deny who we are and we cannot deny our history. And then people are often trying to escape their their history, their stories, their families, you know, their hometowns, and it's you, no matter what, you're carrying it with you.
Utah Phillips said, "Anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?"
Well, it seems here's a better instead of answering it from my own kind of philosophy or experience. LA's kind of been notoriously in the art world had an inferiority complex. It's often
Yeah.
deferred to New York as the authority, the parent. And one of the transformations of the art world that I've witnessed is New York's colonization of LA and seemingly LA's willingness just to hand over all of its institutions to New Yorkers. And it's been often the museums. It's like they'll be showing. They'll have curators from New York. They'll have the galleries come from New York. A lot of the money comes from New York, and it's strange where you have MoCA that's claimed to be the artist's museum, and I've had plenty of conversations with Doug about this. Where isn't it odd how few LA artists they actually do shows about?
Wow.
And I just think, there's something about like, and what was your question? Your question was about who holds the power?
The question is who's entitled to make the rules?
Who's entitled to make the rules?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess we are, but there's something about who people are. And this even goes to the question about, before about, can you, escape yourself or
Yeah.
your history and stuff, is that there's just something where LA was entitled to make the rules on what its artistic community is, and the rule that it made was, well, let's see what New York wants to do with us, and it's so sad. It's so sad.
You're teaching me a lot. It's really similar in the experimental film world, how
Oh
it
wow.
gets so cliquish, so gatekeeper
Yep.
mentality, but that's a reflection. Is it the world does that, or is it these entitled rich kid play games? That it's like art and
Well,
experimental film and poetry and blah blah blah. Yeah, go ahead.
one of the things that angered me the most about the LA art world is um I forget what year it was. It's been probably almost 10 years now, but Jeffrey Deitch was appointed to the head of MoCA. And
Yeah,
everyone was so upset. People were ranting and raving, starting petitions, this and that. And it was less about the fact that he was a New Yorker and more about the fact that he was planning shows about disco and this and that,
yeah,
and incorporating traditionally juxtaposed artists. And eventually he got kicked out after enough backlash. And I thought, you know, that's wrong.
yeah,
Jeffrey Deitch is the mirror to what the LA art community actually is, and all of its insecurities. And not that he's embodying the insecurities, but the insecurities. He's a New Yorker, a successful
yeah,
kind of New Yorker that leans towards pop culture. I mean, who represents the LA art community more than Jeffrey Deitch?
yeah,
I mean, and that's the honest, I
yeah,
think the honest, embodiment of the LA art community, not the version that I would like to see.
yeah, yeah. But
He
that's
should have kept.
studying. Yeah, that's what we do is study the hidden psychic effects. If you just study the surface, you're going to get caught up, and you got to have suspended judgment, look at the patterns and get a big picture view. It doesn't mean you can't still have an aesthetic, bias,
Yep.
you know. Um, so that's funny because the word freedom etymologically breaks down to the same line, giving oneself one's own laws. So what does freedom mean to you now?
Probably not being clouded in expectation. I think we all kind of journey through this world with whether it's expectations from our mentor figures or our parents or um you know society at large that's represented in TV shows and all that kind of stuff. I think kind of freedom represents for me is the kind of liberation from that, and just, having it a space to figure out who we are and who we want to embody.
How do you find peace of mind?
I rarely do. Yeah, I rarely do.
It's 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words. 1, who started it all?
Uh, I just think top of my head, cosmic chaos.
Love it. Are we going to make it?
None of us make it.
I had to write cosmic chaos down. There's a word in Finnegan's Wake, chaosmos. Chaos and cosmos blended into one word.
That's incredible.
Cosmic chaos. That was a good one, dude. Yesterday, the guy goes, "Who started it all?" He goes, "Energy."
Right.
Okay, 3. Where do we put it?
Everywhere we can, public storage.
Yeah, public store. Who's cleaning it up?
Our kids, grandkids,
Wow.
next
And
night.
5, is it serious?
It's definitely serious.
Yeah. So public storage, I got to ask you, we're doing a project on archiving.
Yeah.
Is archiving more innate or more invented? We want to live, be here now. Why do we need to save all this crap and, store it? Well, history, like you were saying, I learned at UCLA some important things. But if we followed the futurists and burned all the museums and libraries, I love the idea. I go to a library every day, but do you think, and then the Egyptians put stuff in their coffin with them.
Yep.
What do you, first is, do you think archiving is more innate or more invented?
I think more innate. I don't know. I think it's important. I think it's very important. And the reason I think it's important is because, like, I feel like I was saved. I feel like my consciousness was saved by being exposed to certain music, certain
Yeah.
movies, certain art. And I think, there's a certain responsibility uh to carry the torch forward, and hopefully other people can be saved too.
But do you have a plan for your own? If you die tomorrow, is your girlfriend or your family know what to do with your stuff? Or do
No,
you?
yeah, but I think about, like, I know in the back of my mind, with time, I need to be organized. And to speak about Mike Kelly, just because I'm close with people that were close with him, um, I mean, he was quite organized, and
Yeah.
his kind of end of life preparation was quite extensive. And even then, it was multiple years of many people's lives sorting out the loose ends.
Yeah.
And it's a really complicated process. I think, like, in kind of circling back to that Jeffrey Valance thing in the book, and what does it mean about externalizing those stories into that vessel? It's like, it's almost like, if things are externalized in that way, like, then Jeffrey doesn't have to worry about that. The books are floating around, people have them in their libraries, hopefully bookstores will have them
Yeah.
for some time, and he kind of washes his hands of needing to worry about that. And then there's a very different story about I know he has many public storage units filled to the brim with, millions of artworks and artifacts and this and that. And I can't imagine what his plans are for all of that, but it will obviously take a certain amount of investment to do something with it.
That's even more the reason, Daniel, because I started asking the archive question after I interviewed him.
Oh, wow.
Because
Yeah.
dig this, I dumpster dove a piece of his art once.
Oh, nice.
It's
Nice.
on the wall. It's a clown of Turin thing. It's like, whoa, I know this. It's like somebody threw it. I mean, really, that's a funny thing. What happens, because so much of great things get trashed.
Yep.
And it's because people don't have a plan, and it's hard to have a plan. I mean, I got lucky and got University of Santa Barbara to store all my tapes of all my interviews for 40
Oh
years.
my gosh.
But, my Doug Harvey interview's up there somewhere, and on audio cassette, and it's climate controlled, and they got these big vaults, and they open up.
Incredible.
So let's see. Got a few more here, and we're out of here. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I'd probably say, "Don't worry, you'll find the escape hatch."
That's good. On what occasion do you lie?
I think if reality's too boring.
Wow, that is that's a Marcel Proust question, by the way. That if reality is too boring, that's funny because the Aborigines in Australia supposedly don't have the word for boring, for boredom. But does that mean they don't get bored, or they just don't have a word for it? They still get bored. You wonder.
Yeah.
Like, does something exist if it doesn't have a word attached to it?
Well, there's a study of pre-contact tribes in the Amazon where obviously they're contacted now, but there was some pre-contact tribes that they were studying from afar. And at some point when contact was made, they understood that there was no word for the word for blue. And so they capitalized on this to see, okay, can we get them to differentiate between green and blue objects? And I mean, there could have been a flaw in how they approached it, but the determination was this tribe, because there was no language for blue, they couldn't differentiate between green and blue objects.
Wow. So that's
Yeah.
anthropological studies?
Yep.
Yeah. That's what McLuhan was involved in that a lot with Edmund Carpenter, and they showed movies to this African tribe once, and the protagonists are talking in the middle of the screen, and then a chicken ran through in the back, and all they could go is, "Where'd that chicken go?" It's just something in the background. We don't see. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I'm going to steal a title of an essay Doug Harvey wrote about my work, "A Storm in Any Port."
Well, that is nice. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh God. Well, I think it's an oil-based ink just off of an ink press when when it's not the digital printing, it's the actual
Yeah,
printing press. Those art catalogs, when you just smell that ink, oh, that 100%.
that is great.
Ever.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Oh God. Well, I like the idea of, the end of the Planet of the Apes, some kind of derelict ruin somewhere. I'd say it like teetering on the edge of a cliff, and probably metal, because when it falls, then it could just become mangled.
Daniel, this is so fun. You have a great imagination, man. I'm happy you're in the world making art because we
Oh, I
need more of that.
appreciate that.
Okay, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
God. Something good I never had and I never want. Um, I want to say success.
That's the answers I get the most. Fame, money, and heroin.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
What's the cultural shift? Oh no, sorry. Yeah. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, you asked this
Oh,
last,
that's right. I asked this. I
but
told
I think you told me Mike Kelly's response which is like, what was it? It was like, I would never be in that situation.
No, no,
Oh, no, you start to cry.
he said cry. Good memory.
Yep.
He said cry, but one of my that's right. I asked you that one. That's right. Do you remember what you said?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't recall. Yeah.
That's a teaser for people to go back to the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's and then I told you about that woman who said, you take the bag of shit and it
Yep.
swoops you out. Yeah. See, I was watching the part one and at like 2 in the morning, and by the time I got to the last 20 minutes, I started fading out and
Those,
fading back in.
yeah.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Oh, I think, I'll say first what doesn't inspire me, which is, we're seeing the rise of authoritarianism. We're seeing the radicalization of politics towards, totalitarianism and authoritarianism in our country. And as dark as that is, like, I think, I like to see those movements as pendulums. And if we're kind of in that moment, it won't be long before the pendulum swings in another direction.
Yeah,
And I'm like I'm really excited at the possibility of seeing that pendulum swing in the opposite direction. And
yeah,
I'm very hopeful for that. I think it'll be good for art and society and everything.
yeah.
It'd be a beautiful moment.
It's good. Viola Spolin's an interesting woman. She sort of helped invent comedy improv in Chicago as a social worker doing role play exercises. So, Saturday Night Live and Second City all came out of social worker. And she said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
It definitely plays a role. I mean, I think, and I've talked about an ex girlfriend of mine. She does these laborious drawings, and she'll often, I'm still in touch with her, and she'll often ask me, God, what's the point? What's the point of me spending so much time? And I'll tell her, it's visible. It like that time and that effort and the meticulousness and the intentionality, whether someone spends 5 seconds with your drawing or not, their brain will understand that this is important simply because this was,
Yeah.
labored and struggle, for me, kind of more subjectively. um I don't know. I mean, I like the struggle as like a kind of improvisational collaborative partner where, there could be a lot of different forms of struggle, but it's I think there's like a contrivance to someone believing that, oh, I can just come up with all the most great, creative ideas and be some genius or whatever. It's like, no, life and it kicking you in its ass or in your ass is kind of your dancing partner, and that
Yeah.
will actually lead you to some place way more interesting.
Dude, really good. That's Buster Keaton, turn a stumble into a dance.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like, I love that.
What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Um, well, I guess the biggest question kind of creatively is like, where am I going?
Yeah.
I know I'm going somewhere, but I really don't. It's hard to see the destination, and I have to trust the things that I'm making will lead me on my way.
Dude, that's flaneur. That's psychogeography. Just wander aimlessly and you'll have an epiphany in everydayness. Is that maybe I asked that question, but I ask people if the journey is more important than the destination, why do we have to name or seek a destination? Everybody goes, well, to have a focus. Like sometimes people go, you don't have to name it. And
No,
it's like it is hard because just having words, we think, you know, we have or just getting up, you think, "Oh, I have to get up."
yeah.
I can't lay in bed all day. No,
Yep.
yeah, you can if you want.
Yeah.
No, that's the joke. One of my favorite McLuhan jokes is the mother goes, "It's like Earache My Eye" by Cheech and Chong. It's like, "You got to get up," and the guy goes, "No, I don't want to get up." "You got to get up. It's the morning. Get up." "I don't want to get up." "You got to get up. You're the principal."
That's good.
How has making art shaped your behavior? Especially how is making, what's your I word? In
Interventionist or
that is a great, what kind of artist you got? Interventionist. That is a great genre, isn't it?
yeah.
How has making interventionist art shaped your behavior?
It's probably given an outlet for my deeper demons.
Yeah.
I think it's like I think the kind of mischievous impulses that like uh fuel some of my creativity could really have different outlets, and I think it's like um I don't know, it sends me on a nice path, I think,
Yeah.
versus
Yeah, we have a Carl Jung reading club, and it's so cool because it turns into like a group shrink session. But
oh yeah.
it's just you read a couple. I mean, yeah, have you ever read Jung or studied him?
Well, I've talked to people about him. I really haven't. I should, but
Well, I don't know if you should, but it is interesting because it's kind of, it seems bullshitty in a way, the shadow and all that, but it really resonates somehow to get people to open up and be, yeah, I think.
yeah.
So, um, Thornton Wilder said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time." You've laid your cards on the table for over 3.5 hours. I'm not implying you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Keeping things interesting.
Yeah. What gives you the most optimism?
Oh God. I just creativity. Just
Yeah.
feeling, experiencing, and witnessing both as a viewer and as an artist, like creative moments. Just that's kind of one of the few things that gives me optimism.
Yeah. But it appears, are you more an optimist or more a pessimist?
I think I'm a recovering optimist. That's how
They,
it,
go ahead.
that's how it feels today.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just that's where I'm at. Like at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's my mom. I said, "Can I ask you these questions?" She goes, "Yeah, but everything I say today, I might say different tomorrow." I goes, "That's okay."
Yep.
But they asked McLuhan, "Are you an optimist or a pessimist?" He says, "I'm an apocalypse. We're fucked."
Yeah.
And he didn't really say fuck, but he basically was saying he knew the etymology on the word apocalypse, which means to reveal.
Oh wow.
So it's like you're atomic dog, and you're just pulling the curtain back in the Wizard of Us.
Yeah.
You're Toto.
I love
Um,
it.
Daniel, it's really been fun, and I hope we can do it again
Oh
with
yeah.
more in the future. And Wilhelm Reich said the first question I asked in part one is, "What's the best thing for a human being?" Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you. Thank you so much for your time and energy. Really, really fun, dude.
Well, thank you. It was super, super fun. It was great to
Yeah.
talk with you.
Yeah. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever.
Well, we'll have to do that panel soon.
I wanna do the salon.
Awesome.
Thanks.
So great
Thanks,
to talk
Daniel.
to you.